Okay, engine stop. The Eagle has landed.
The fascinating stories about outer space narrated by cosmonauts makes everyone want to take at least one trip out there and witness the mesmerizing cosmos with our own eyes. Maybe sometime in the future, we might be able to do this for real. But outer space isn't a very safe or comfortable place. Humans know very little about the universe and what lies out there. In the past, many astronauts have encountered some unexplainable and downright terrifying things in space. And even with the modern and much more sophisticated equipment and knowledge, astronomers are unable to provide a logical explanation for these objects astronauts witness and other strange experiences. Here are the 20 creepiest things in space seen by astronauts. Music in space. In 1969, the NASA astronauts in orbit around the moon heard a strange whistling sound they described as outer spacey, weird, and eerie. Astronauts Tom Stafford, Gene Carman, and John Young reported hearing this sound during the Apollo 10 mission that was also a test run for the first mission to the moon. Astronauts and equipment both were taken to the moon, and the stakes were high because this was not a simulation, it was real space. The flight crew heard the sound while on the dark side of the moon and while they were out of radio contact with NASA ground control. Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins, in a book published many years after, claimed that the noise was just interference between the lunar surface and command module's VHF radios. The astronauts, however, maintained that they heard actual noise that lasted a good hour and scared them out of their wits.
Boy, that sure is weird music.
They described it as music from another world.
That whistling sound?
When the sound faded away, Commander Kerman said, "Boy, that sure is weird music. We're going to have to find out about that." To this, Pilot Young replied that no one would believe them, and to an extent, he was right. Cigar-shaped UFO. In 2017, a strange cigar-shaped unidentified object passed through our solar system. Scientists were left puzzled by this unanticipated visitor and had many unanswered questions. The object was named Oumuamua, and its physical properties didn't resemble any known object like a comet or an asteroid. It was difficult to decipher what it was and how it was moving in this particular manner. But now scientists think it may have been an unusual comet. Dr. Marco, who studied the cigar-shaped UFO with his team of researchers, said that the heat from the sun against its frozen surface accounted for the abnormal acceleration through the solar system because comets have both rocks and ice, with the ice line behind the ice line where the temperature is low enough for it to remain frozen. But that doesn't answer how this asteroid or comet was 10 times longer than it was wide and suddenly accelerated for no discernible astrophysical reason. Some experts who did consider artificial origin think Oumuamua could be a light sail floating in interstellar space as a debris from what was once an advanced technological equipment. This might explain the various anomalies of this UFO, including the unusual geometry inferred from its light curve, the low thermal emission suggesting high reflectivity, and its deviation from a Keplerian orbit without any signs of a cometary tail or spin-up torques. Number 3. The Green Bolt. Gordon Cooper had multiple strange encounters in space. The well-known astronaut, who was also the last American to fly alone in space, witnessed other unexplainable phenomenon in 1963. He was flying aboard the Mercury capsule for a circumnavigational trip around the globe. Everything was normal, but then on his final orbit while passing above Perth, Australia, he saw something terrifying. A green object came swinging towards him at an unbelievable speed and scared the lights out of him. At first, he assumed it was just a figment of his imagination. After all, there had been several incidents where pilots and astronauts saw mysterious objects, but their equipment detected nothing. But this case was different because this superfast green object was picked up by a radar tracking station located in Western Australia. This was groundbreaking as now Cooper had solid evidence to back up his claim. Therefore, he reported the incident to the National Broadcasting Company after returning to Earth. He was excited to tell the world his side of the story. But Gordon claimed that he was approached by NBC reporters who told him they had been strictly instructed to not ask any questions about the green bolt. Conspiracy theorists think the government didn't want the public to find out about this, especially because from the details it seemed like the strange object was much more advanced and sophisticated than anything we have invented. Number 4. Fireflies. Fireflies lighting up the night sky in the woods is definitely a view that must not be missed. But is it possible for these shimmering insects to exist outside of Earth's atmosphere? Logically and scientifically, it's not possible. But John Glenn, an astronaut and US Senator who passed away at the age of 95 in 2016, saw something that looked a lot like fireflies. He was the last living member of the original Mercury 7 crew of test pilots turned astronauts. All was going as planned for Glenn and his Mercury spacecraft when he noticed a strange phenomenon. The spacecraft was in orbit, and when the sun came up, Glenn reported that he was surrounded by thousands of tiny glowing particles that were moving alongside the ship and spinning around. He claimed that he had never seen anything like it. He stared in awe at the glowing bits. Mission Control was worried these might be the pieces of the capsule's heat shield disintegrating. Glenn said that they swirled around the capsule and went in front of the window and were all brilliantly lit up. During his post-flight medical exam, Glenn told his psychologist about these space fireflies. The psychologist inquired whether they said something to him, to which Glenn burst out laughing, and later on the mystery was figured out by experts. They believe what John Glenn saw were tiny particles of ice, the product of hydrogen peroxide decomposition in the spacecraft engines. Number 5. Metal objects on Mars. Mars is mostly described as the red planet with a few hills, a dusty environment, and rocky terrain. The planet is pretty dull to explore most of the time, but once in a while, the Mars rover comes across something exciting. The Curiosity rover, through a high-resolution image taken from its mast cam on Sol 173, detected something that looked a lot like a hunk of metal, described as a small metallic-looking protuberance. It actually resembles a thick, bent nail sticking out of the Martian surface and is visible in part because it projects a little shadow on the rock below. The shadow is, however, abnormally small. The protuberance is estimatedly 0.5 centimeters or 1/5 of an inch in height. It was first noticed by Elisabetta Bonors, an image editing expert. No one knows for sure what it is, but it could be iron, probably from a meteorite. Some people favor this theory as the iron seems like it's not oxidized, which would track with the low levels of oxygen present in the Martian atmosphere. Some believe it could also be something that has grown on the rock below. The strange thing is that the apparent metal object wasn't covered in dust and had a distinct shimmer like most metallic surfaces tend to have. Number 6. Strange lights. Astronaut Leroy Chow was the commander of the International Space Station for about 6.5 months in 2005, and that was when he witnessed something so scary that it made his heart leap up into his throat. The astronaut was on a spacewalk about 230 miles above Earth and was traveling at almost 17,000 miles per hour. This was when he suddenly saw some lights that seemed to be in a line, and it was almost like an upside-down check mark. He saw them fly by and thought it was awfully strange. Chow thinks he was visited by aliens. In his statement, he said, "I don't rule it out 100%. I have an open mind, and I do believe there's other life in the universe." He believes that if life is out there, it's much more advanced than humanity, and they possess the technological means to travel immense distances in short amounts of time. Or maybe they're from a parallel universe and are able to visit ours. Leroy wants them to reveal themselves to humans. The crew and Leroy saw the lights by chance as they flew past them. Conspiracy theorists and alien enthusiasts wholeheartedly believe that these lights were extraterrestrial beings or their spacecrafts, but there's no hardcore proof besides the word of the crew that witnessed them. Number 7. They're watching us. A retired NASA chief of communication systems named Maurice Chatelain published his book titled Our Cosmic Ancestors in the year 1975. In this book, Chatelain revealed a terrifying story about the first ever manned mission to the moon. According to him, just moments before Armstrong set foot on the lunar surface, he spotted 2 alien UFOs hovering above him. Another astronaut named Edwin Aldrin took many pictures of the strange ships, some of which were published in the June 1975 issue of Modern People magazine. It was also revealed that on Earth, NASA experienced a 2-minute-long period of radio silence after Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. Many people claim that in the lost 2 minutes he was saying, "These babies are so huge, sir, enormous, oh God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecrafts out here. Lines up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon, watching us." snaked in space. Franklin Story Musgrave is famous for being the second astronaut to have participated in 6 space flights. Besides that, he's also a physician and an esteemed public speaker. His experience can speak to his credibility. It would be hard to assume that the accomplished astronaut would lie about something so unsettling. According to the 87-year-old retiree, Musgrave claimed that he saw a snake in space. Like many of his colleagues, he reported that he observed the strange phenomenon multiple times. In 2 of his missions, Musgrave saw a snake about 6 to 8 feet in length. He described it as being elastic as it seems to have internal waves in it, and apparently the snake followed them for quite some time. Franklin further said that the more time you spend in space, the more you see an incredible amount of things there, and this leads you, so to speak, to the realization that there are other living beings. But was there really an alien snake out there? Most experts think there is a very simple explanation for it. Even Musgrave acknowledged that it could have been the rubber seal on the shuttle's main engine, but there's no way to explain how he observed the same rubber seal more than once and on several missions. So there was a chance that it was in fact something else, maybe even an extraterrestrial being according to alien enthusiasts. Fleet of alien ships. What's scarier than seeing one UFO in the eerie darkness of outer space? Well, an entire fleet of UFOs. Astronaut Gordon Cooper, who is an American aerospace engineer, test pilot, U.S. Air Force pilot, and the youngest of 7 original astronauts, claimed that he witnessed several unidentified UFOs flying together. The accomplished astronaut had made successful expeditions in Mercury 9 and Gemini 5. In his autobiography titled Leap of Faith that was co-authored by Bruce Henderson, Cooper recalled his experiences with potential aliens. He saw his first UFO while flying over West Germany in 1951, but he denied the reports of this particular sighting. And this happened again 10 years later in space, and Cooper wasn't the only one to notice the presence of the UFOs, because other colleagues of his also had a scary encounter with an alien spacecraft. Cooper recalls that in May 1957, his crew had set up a precision landing system on a dry lake bed. The cinetheodolite system could take pictures at 30 frames per second. The crew members James Bittick and Jack Gettis, who worked at the site, returned later that morning to report that they had seen a strange-looking saucer aircraft that didn't make any sound on either landing or takeoff. They explained that the saucer hovered over them, landed 50 yards away with the help of 3 extending landing gears, and then took off when they tried approaching it for a closer look. Cooper reported the incident to the Pentagon and sent the developed film in a locked courier pouch he was instructed not to print. But he did see the images, and according to him, he saw in them exactly what Bittick and Gettis had described. Number 10. Contamination. Bob Kirby was an astronaut who took part in his first spacewalk in the mid-90s, and during his very first attempt, he was struck by disaster when a connector to a hose began leaking suddenly. The poor man was completely drenched by the toxic ammonia being sprayed out. Bob could not go back inside the space station covered in ammonia and contaminate the entire station. However, he did not let the unfortunate incident get on his nerves. He remained calm and devised a plan. Ammonia has a low boiling point, and using this information, Bob decided the best approach was to bake himself in the sunlight for an extra 30 minutes so the ammonia would get vaporized. He just remained outside, hoping that all the ammonia got off. If he had gone back inside covered in ammonia, he would have poisoned the entire crew and himself. Fortunately, his plan worked and he was able to go back inside, but he was probably traumatized for the rest of his life. Number 11. Terrifying encounter. Soviet cosmonaut named Vladimir Kovalyonok saw something amazing from the porthole of the Salyut 6 spacecraft on May 5, 1981. According to the cosmonaut, the ship was flying over South Africa at around 6 in the evening and heading towards the Indian Ocean when he saw an elliptically shaped object that flew along with the ship. From the frontal aspect, it appeared to be spinning in the direction of light. Vladimir said that the object resembled a boom. He saw it become transparent as if there was a body inside it. At the other end, he saw something that looked like a gas discharge life from a jet. Then something happened which he claimed it was very difficult for him to describe. He admitted that it wasn't artificial because an artificial object couldn't have that sort of shape. He didn't know what to think of the strange movement of the UFO. It would shrink, then expand and pulsate. And while he was watching this, 2 explosions occurred. There was a gap of just 0.5 seconds between the explosions. It was moving on a suborbital trajectory because if it wasn't, he wouldn't have been able to see it. There were two smoke-like clouds that formed a boom. Vladimir said that the scary UFO approached him and just kept staring at him. Soon after, they went into complete darkness, also called the Twilight Zone, for a bit, and when he recovered, the two spheres were gone for good. Unfortunately, Vladimir didn't have any proof to support his claim, but many still believe that he was telling the truth. Number 12. Knocking sound. Yang Liwei, the first man from China to reach space, was on his maiden flight in 2003 when he experienced something terrifying. He was alone in a tiny spacecraft in endless space when he suddenly heard a sound, a knocking sound. Liwei recalls that he distinctly heard someone knocking on the body of the spaceship, exactly like someone would knock on an iron bucket with a wooden hammer. He was quite confused by the sound, as it wasn't coming from outside nor the inside of the spaceship. He naturally got a little nervous and peered out of the porthole to see if something was wrong or someone was actually out there. But he was unable to find anything that would explain the creepy knocking sound. Unfortunately, he's still not figured out what the sound was even after returning to Earth. He has also tried recreating it, but has failed to imitate the sound, and therefore even experts cannot help him identify what it was. Because there is no medium for sound to travel, space is expected to be completely silent. So the only explanation for the knocking is that something was physically hitting the spacecraft carrying Liwei. But according to Professor Godchair Huang, a space engineering expert at the National University of Singapore, that doesn't speculate that something was actually out there knocking. His colleague Wei Seng So thinks that the knocking could be a result of the expansion or contraction of the spaceship, particularly because its temperature does considerably change within the orbit. Yang Liwei no longer travels to space, but subsequent Chinese astronauts have also reported hearing the same sound on missions in 2005 and 2008. Number 13. Alien City on the Moon. Even today, astronomers know very little about the dark side of the Moon, some of which remains hidden from us permanently. The far side of the Moon facing away from us is only 18% visible once in a while, and this has led many conspiracy theorists and alien enthusiasts to speculate that because we don't get to see this part of the Moon, it is where aliens have built an entire civilization of their own. They have built multiple cities and all kinds of structures. This far-flung idea didn't just appear out of nowhere. Many people have closely examined the image of the far side of the Moon, and they've identified square-shaped rocks that resemble buildings and structures that seem to have been abandoned millions of years ago. Some people also pointed out that the objects on this side of the Moon appeared to be reflective, but they have dark black parts and right angles that could be artificial structures. They also noticed that some of the objects had openings for the alien spacecrafts to enter and exit. There were even claims of some ships being stuck halfway out of these buildings. But scientists think that that's just too far-fetched. These are most likely just rocks, and the features pointing towards extraterrestrial involvement could just be a consequence of the blurry footage taken in outer space, where cameras tend to malfunction a lot. Number 14. Halloween Asteroid. 2015 TB145 is a sub-kilometer asteroid that has been classified as a near-Earth object and might be a potentially hazardous asteroid for the Apollo group. It is almost 650 meters in diameter, and it safely passed 1.27 lunar distances from Earth on October 30th, 2015 at 5:01 UTC. It passed by the Earth again in November 2018. It was first spotted by Pan-STARRS using a 1.8-meter Ritchie-Chrétien telescope. It wasn't discovered sooner, as it spends most of its time beyond the orbit of Mars. This spooky asteroid was named the Great Pumpkin, or the Halloween asteroid, because it closely resembled a human skull in the radio frequency images of it taken at the Arecibo Observatory. And a funny thing, its closest approach to the Earth coincidentally occurred on Halloween Day. The asteroid has two craters that look like dark eye sockets and sit almost 100 meters across from each other. Number 15. A Face on Mars. Cydonia is a region on Mars that gained the attention of both the scientific and the alien enthusiast community around the globe. The name originally referred to the albedo feature, a distinctively colored area that was seen from Earth-bound telescopes. The images from Viking 1 and Viking 2 orbiters revealed a detailed view of Cydonia. 18 pictures of the region were taken, of which 7 had better resolutions of 250 megapixels. In one of these good images taken by the Viking 2 on July 25, 1976, a 2-kilometer-long Cydonian mesa situated 40.75 north latitude, 9.46 west longitude looked a lot like a humanoid face. The face was dismissed at first by the Viking chief scientist Gertie Soffen as a trick of light. Other NASA scientists also believed it was just an illusion caused by pareidolia. They said that the huge rock formation in the center that resembled a human head was actually formed by shadows giving the illusions of eyes, nose, and mouth. But this didn't stop the rumors, and soon enough everyone was talking about the new evidence of life on Mars and how NASA was trying to cover it up. But 20 years later, more images from the Mars Global Surveyor revealed that the formation was actually a mesa 1.5 kilometers across, and the facial features were nothing but shadows cast by its unique shape. Number 16. Lost cosmonauts. Back in 1961, a Soviet cosmonaut, Yuri Gagarin, made history by becoming the first human being to leave Earth and enter outer space. But two Italian brothers who claimed that they began monitoring the Soviet space program transmissions in 1957 exposed to the world that there may have been others in the past who didn't make it back alive. The Soviet space program faced its fair share of disasters like the US space program. In 1960, a rocket launch in the Soviet Union claimed the lives of around 160 people just near the launch pad. This also means that the Soviets had to cover up some pretty embarrassing incidents. The Italian brothers claim to have made recordings of several supposed crewed missions by the Soviet Union that were not public knowledge. This included a Morse code SOS signal from a spacecraft that seemed to be moving away from Earth's orbit. One of their most popular recordings was from November 1963. It was supposedly one of the lost cosmonauts speaking in distress as they re-entered the atmosphere, dying before they returned to Earth. The brothers didn't speak Russian, so they had to get a translator to figure out what was said. To this day, the brothers maintain that the recordings are genuine. The unfortunate cosmonaut was heard crying out in pain that they were hot as their spacecraft burnt up. The Soviets naturally dismissed these claims and recordings as a hoax. Number 17. Orbs fly past Space Shuttle. The Atlanta Space Shuttle was on its routine mission to the International Space Station back in 2006. About half a dozen astronauts were on board, along with lots of spare parts and equipment for the space station. For the most part, it was an ordinary and uneventful expedition, but the astronauts on board the Space Shuttle have claimed that they saw something extraordinary out there. Their team on the ground didn't take these claims seriously, but the astronauts maintained their claim. The footage of this strange incident showed 3 mysterious round orbs slowly flying past the Atlantis. The astronauts described these shining orbs to ground control on the live public feed with NASA, but the ground crew dismissed the concern, saying these were just reflections on the camera lens. But a crew member argued that it was a structure that was flexible and didn't look like anything that was part of the shuttle they were on. These were super fast and quickly moved to the nose of the orbiter by almost 100 feet. The video footage also showed the 3 orbs hovering close to the shuttle in a triangular formation. From the looks of it, the lens reflection theory isn't the least bit convincing. Number 18. Bones on Mars. A photo from NASA's Curiosity rover on Mars set the internet on fire when netizens noticed that the robot had actually captured a picture of what seemed to be a thigh bone. But what was a bone doing on the red planet? The claim that it was a bone appeared on a UFO blog and was quickly picked up by the mainstream media outlets. At first, you only see rocks and dust in the photos, but the strange bone-shaped object in the background caught the eye of the alien enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists. The object does resemble a femur bone, and because it's not straight and doesn't resemble the typical human femur, many have speculated that it could belong to an alien. NASA, however, dismissed these claims and released the photo of this supposed thigh bone from Curiosity with a scientific and logical explanation. In the caption, they wrote, While this Mars rock may look like a femur thigh bone, it is not the fossilized remains of a Martian. The mission science team members said the shape of the rock had been sculpted by erosion either by wind or water. And though Mars did possess habitable conditions in the past, there is no evidence that supports the assumption that life actually existed there. Number 19. Alien walking on moon. Apollo 15 or the Apollo 17 managed to pick up something unbelievable while they were on their missions to the moon in 1971 and 1972. But this discovery went unnoticed for decades until finally a YouTuber named Wow for Real posted a video in which he pointed out that an alien figure was visible walking on the moon in the footage. The strange figure can be witnessed on Google Moon at specified coordinates. From the footage, it looks like a dark, shady alien creature is just wandering along the surface of the moon. Unlike humans who need specialized suits and oxygen, the alien creature seems to be doing well without any aiding equipment. It's hard not to get convinced, especially once you see the footage for yourself. But Noah Petro, the deputy project scientist for the Lunar Renaissance Orbiter, quickly and vehemently rejected any rumors regarding aliens waltzing on the lunar surface. According to him, the picture was from either Apollo 15 or 17 and no such lunar features are visible that could cause the patterns on the ground. He thinks it was probably something on the film, maybe a scratch or an eyelash. He also emphasized that as the video was captured before digital film was a thing, so there was a high chance the film could have gotten messed up. Number 20. Dead floating animals. Scientists have time and again emphasized that life forms inhabiting the Earth cannot live in outer space. Neil Armstrong became the first man to step on the surface of the moon, but before that became possible, many incredible sacrifices had to be made. Before any person went to space, the unsung heroes of space exploration were animals. Scientists had no idea what it would be like for living creatures to leave Earth's atmosphere and how weightlessness affects the mammalian body. Could they even handle the radiation from the sun? To find answers to these questions, the US and Russia first sent monkeys, chimps, dogs, and other animals into space. Unfortunately, the spacecrafts were still being perfected and launch and re-entry procedures were still faulty. These poor animals had little chances of survival. In some cases, the animals that flew in space were never recovered. This led many to believe that there are still several abandoned ships floating in orbit among space junk with the dead animals.